Are the Chiefs and NFL doing the right thing by allowing fans in the stands this season? The team announced on Monday that nearly 17,000 fans would be allowed into Arrowhead Stadium, and tickets for the first 3 home games will go on sale soon. Star columnist Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian talk about this decision on SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, August 18th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. After a break, we carry the conversation to the high school sports level. Sam wrote a terrific column Sunday about weighing the balance between playing and not playing fall high school sports in the COVID-19 world. He shares with us the thoughts he gathered after talking to coaches, administrators, and parents. So here we go with Sam and Vahe. Sam and Vahe with us today, and there are a lot of topics I want to get to, but let's start with one of the more recent ones, and that is fans in the stands at Arrowhead Stadium. I guess I thought that maybe it was going to happen. Sporting Kansas City is going to start next week with fans in the stands, but we haven't seen that around our parts, right? Because the Royals, no fans in the stands. I got to admit, though, it was a little jarring to see the numbers. Almost 17,000 people are going to be allowed in, and even though the Chiefs have, they talked about the spacing, in the pods, the group of 6 pods, and no more than 2 pods on a row, and probably nobody behind you or in front of you. I don't know. It's still a little jarring to read. Let me ask you guys each: would you be interested in buying a pod of seats at Arrowhead Stadium?
Sam, you're definitely more qualified than I am as a pod person to speak to this.
I would not. I don't think that I would do that. But I'm also this is off topic and it's not really answering the spirit of your question. But the at-home experience for an NFL game is pretty freaking sweet. Especially when compared to the in-stadium. It's just it's so easy. It's cheaper. There's a lot of things going for it. I'm not there, but I'll say this, one quick thing. You mentioned the Royals haven't had fans. I don't know if you guys noticed the email about the Royals game tonight that has since been postponed to tomorrow as part of a doubleheader, but they were going to open up the press box for the first time. I assume that is step one in having fans. Because the media, we've been set up in the Diamond Club, and now that's going to be fans. So now the media needs to go up to the press box. As I heard on a competing podcast of yours, Blair, John Sherman and the Royals do have a plan for fans. They're just waiting for it to be implemented. I'm surprised that public health people have okayed the plan with Sporting and the plan with the Chiefs. That is at least a mild surprise to me. But honestly, if it's been okayed, then I feel like they've got to do it
by the health officials everybody. Mayor, I saw where Quentin Lucas was quoted in the story, and by the way, that competing pod, I believe that's released once a week. That's true. I believe you have all week to put that pod together.
Yeah, it's just cute. It's a cute little tiny.
by a cute kid.
Yeah.
It's a terrific pod. I wholly recommend Mellinger Minutes for the ears. So, what do you think, Vahe? Would you be part of a pod at Arrowhead if you could be? And
Well, I'd be hesitant. I'd be skeptical. But it's interesting, Sam. Blair, you've written about this extensively, and we've talked about it in the past. But it's making me think all the more about the way the home setup is superior to the in-stadium experience in general. And I don't know if I've thought that much about what's going to come out on the other side of this, but between all the social media aspects to being at home, the comforts of home, all these things, I do really wonder, even in a post-vaccine world, how we're going to feel about these stadium experiences. And look, in a way, there's no substitute for being there, but in a way, there's plenty of substitutes for being there. So I that's a little different than what you're asking, but it just has made me think more about that. I can only describe it in the sense of what we've been exposed to in our own lives, with where you go with other people and how you feel personally with a mask or on or out on your porch with friends. And it just feels to me like a bridge farther than I'd be ready for. But I get why people would want to do it. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, Sam, I love this point Sam made in his column the other day about, you didn't phrase it this way, Sam, but it's kind of how I took it, about taking out the extremists on either end, and then you can have a real debate about how to look at things. And I think if you're really rational and reasonable about this, you understand that every step of it kind of is part of the scientific process. If you're reasonably cautious and taking some baby steps out there, that I think makes you a normal person who's trying to find a rational approach to it. So I find myself not begrudging anybody trying to do this in a responsible, respectful way, but I just don't know I do know that that's not 100% airtight, and that's the tolerance question, and it also affects everybody else, so it's just so complicated.
I guess limit lines in the restrooms. Good luck with that. And
well, you know what? There was a great line in there that I fully expect Sam to actually just dig into the plate and go big swing on here. But it was, unless you're fully engaged in eating or drinking, you have to have your mask on, something to that effect. Seems to me that there could be a long-term engagement with the drinking that keeps the masks off.
Yeah, I think a lot of Chiefs fans are actively drinking from 2 hours before kickoff until they stop serving after the third quarter or whatever it is. All that stuff, like, there was some line in there about, they're going to get some, higher accreditation from, some health survey. It's like some public health, sort of deeming the Chiefs as, the gold standard or whatever. But that's all this stuff that's on paper. And all of those precautions sound great on paper. Hospital grade, disinfectant, distancing, all these things sound great on paper. But anybody here been to an NFL game? Like, I just don't know how well those things are going to be followed. Or how the hell you enforce them. I mean, I just think about, the upper concourse bathroom at Arrowhead Stadium, and there's some, poor Chiefs employee making $6 an hour or whatever, and he goes in there and he's trying to get these people to distance. Like, that is, that guy needs hazard pay. Like, whoever goes in there, I just don't know how that any of that works.
And back to one of the points, I think, Blair, you said it right away about, maybe we've known there would be a trickle of people going back sometime soon, but when you come down to brass tacks and look at what that number means in Arrowhead of whatever it is, 16,723, that seems like 10 times more than I was thinking would be coming in. And maybe I just never thought it through well enough what these percentages mean, but that's a fair amount of people. That's not, easily assembled, easily brought in, easily taken out without exposure to each other. It's sort of encapsulated in what Sam said about the bathroom. Like, but how are you going to be having people around enough to enforce this stuff? Is it enforceable, the rules they're going to have imposed on them? I mean, really, is somebody going to be saying, hey, look, you just took a swig here about 3 years ago, you need to have the mask back on? I just don't know how that's going to look.
Something I think about is, we've often said how fortunate in the timing of all this that the Chiefs were to get in their Super Bowl run, right? Yeah. Well, now they can't take full advantage of the Super Bowl afterglow. Look, Arrowhead Stadium was going to sell all their tickets anyway, right? But I'm sure they would have been in for a mighty price increase at 75,000 seats per game, and they're not going to realize the full financial benefit of a Super Bowl, a post Super Bowl run. And even with 16,700 in there, it's probably more than most NFL teams are going to get, but nowhere near what the Chiefs could have realized financially because of this. I also wonder what 17,000 or so folks who might be chopping will sound like. Will it be kind of echoey in Arrowhead Stadium with the chop? Will this discourage the chop a little bit? I wonder. I maybe wonder about that.
It is weird because the Chiefs have probably sometime in 2012 football was going on the field at Arrowhead at some point in 2012 where around 16,000 actual people were in the stands. You know what I mean? Like I have to believe that's true. But none of them cared. That was a dead. It is weird. I mean, because that 16,000, with these pods was spread out. That's not 16,000 in a lower bowl. There's going to be people, way up in those top corners of Arrowhead, and that's going to be 16,000 very passionate Chiefs fans. If you're going to the trouble to go, to pay the money, all these things, like you are a huge Chiefs fan. You know what I mean? And you're going to be screaming your ass off. And I just that'll be. There's so much in 2020 that's unique, but there has never been an NFL scene like that, right? And the other thing is, there's probably not going to be a single opposing team fan in the stadium. You would think. I mean, because they're going to be sold to season ticket holders first, and I don't know what the season ticket base is, but it's a lot more than 16,000 people. And so, and then after that, it's Jackson County residents. And, maybe there's a Texans fan, that's going to get in on that or whatever. But that's just another unique thing. We're not going to have a replay of the, that little mini controversy when a lot of the defense was pissed off last year during the Vikings and Packers game, right?
Right.
I'm sorry this isn't clear to me, but what do you understand, Sam, particularly since you've been in the middle of it, about whether are the gates going to be open to people that don't have tickets? I mean, is there going to be full
parking gates? I don't
tailgating
know.
Encouraged? Because it's just interesting to me to picture that.
Yeah, there were limitations on the tailgate. I don't remember seeing. I don't remember reading that you need a game ticket to get into the parking lot. What I do remember reading is that the tailgating will. Well, again, this is whether it's enforceable or not, right? But their limitation on tailgating is you can only tailgate with the people in your pod. So there's no 25-person, big tent kind of tailgate. This would be, 6 or fewer by definition of the pod that you can tailgate with, which can still be fun, right? I mean, you can grill burgers for 6 people and, play bags or whatever. Although that, by the letter of the law, is banned because they're trying to enforce it just behind your car or truck. But we've seen how well the Arrowhead parking attendants have been enforcing tailgating rules in the past, right?
You mean with the hundreds and hundreds of spaces open and lots that are closed because it's too full?
Exactly. I mean, it's all, like so much else. It's a microcosm of 2020, right? Like everybody's guessing. It's going to be chaotic. There's going to be people who take advantage. There's going to be people who are cautious. There's going to be people who are trying to enforce rules. There's going to be people who are trying to act, by protocol themselves. And there's going to be people who, are, I'm not wearing a mask. And, it's going to be everything. It's going to be a mess, a beautiful, passionate mess.
One other quick thing just to throw in. So that opener is September 10th. Mm-hmm. And the Royals home opener was, about 3 weeks ago? So the Royals at that game are doing everything they can to keep people out, including, closing gates, and so that they only the 11 media people or 37 media people can come in. And now we're going to have, the gates, thrown open one way or another. And it's just going back to your point, Sam, about kind of the guessing. Like, it's fascinating how every little thing can be the pendulum swinging wildly from one to the other while we're trying to settle into the middle.
Yep.
All right, quick break. We'll be right back with Sam and Vahe. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeat KC Offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Okay, we're back with Vahe Gregorian and Sam Mellinger. I want to talk about a couple other things quickly, but first, back on the Chiefs, I see where Steve Spagnuolo made some news in his recent appearance. Rarely do we get news from these Zoom calls, but boy, Steve Spagnuolo came through for us in a big way yesterday with the announcement of Mike Pennell's suspension. I don't believe the Chiefs have announced that yet, but looks like defensive lineman Mike Pennell won't be starting the season with the Chiefs.
Well, it was so out of the blue that when the Chiefs were asked to comment on it later, they said, well, Coach will comment it on Wednesday. so it seemed they were not prepared with a news release on the topic.
Right. So, hey, Sam, I wanted to get into the column you wrote on Sunday. I thought it was terrific, and it has to do with high school sports. And it really kind of crystallized a lot of things that I've felt about it all along. And to me, what it came down to is there are, the sensible side of me says we shouldn't be gathering just about under any circumstance. And yet what you can't do is project the lives of 16, 17, 18-year-old kids and what sports means to them and how important it is in their lives. And we're dealing with it on a daily basis on a professional and a college level. And we don't think about it as much at a high school level, but in terms of number of participants and activities, these are the people that are being impacted the most by the COVID from a sports perspective.
Yeah.
Just tell us how your feelings changed just in reporting and writing that column.
Well, yeah, I mean, so we spend most of the last 5 months or whatever, and especially the last 2 or 3 months thinking about the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, MLS, and college football, whether those sports can get going. And you talk to scientists and, just everybody you can who, kind of lives this stuff. And, do you bubble? Do you not bubble? All these things. And high school just kind of gets forgotten about a little bit. They're pushed down. And, as I'm doing this reporting, like we're all doing, of talking to epidemiologists and whoever else, if high school sports ever came to my mind, it's like, well, that would be, bat spit crazy to have any sort of high school. You can't do that. They don't have the money for testing. They don't have, these big medical staffs, nothing. Like, let's not even consider that. But then I started calling people, coaches, administrators, some parent, and you hear what you just said, Blair, about, what it means, and the precautions that they're willing to take. And you start thinking about, here's one thing that I think gets lost is with all this stuff is I think that too often we tend to digest COVID exposure or whatever as sort of zero sum, as is there risk in doing that? If yes, don't do it. If no, do it. And that's just not realistic. The decisions are smarter if you think of what is the added risk, or is there added risk? Is it neutral or is it less? And that's when it starts getting a lot more complicated. And because sure, like it seems really crazy to put a bunch of 15 to 18-year-old kids together in a sport as that is just fundamentally contact, right? Like football during this time, and it shouldn't matter if you have separate water bottles and all this stuff. But then you start to hear from these coaches and administrators about like, okay, well, what do you think they're going to be doing from 3 to 6 if they're not at practice? And is that going to be better or worse than if they are in a controlled environment with adults? To enforce these things, respected adults. I think that's important to enforce these things. Also with the incentive that kids might have, when they're not at school or not at practice, it seems to me that kids who are involved in a sport or an extracurricular activity are going to have more incentive to be responsible and follow, guidelines with those activities than they would without it. There's a mental health part of this too that I think people can forget about. There's a lot of factors, and I think the thing that I get frustrated about, and Vahe, you just brought this up about, it feels like we spend a lot of time trying to satisfy the people on each extreme. People who think that if you're within 100 feet of a human being, that's a death wish. And then the other side of the people who think that, a guideline to wear a mask is, some sort of infringement on their constitutional rights or whatever. And there's got to be, I don't know what the percentage is, but I got to hope it's 70, 80% of us in the middle there that are trying to make the right decisions for ourselves. And the decision of, like, the KCK schools, for instance, to call off sports, we can debate that, whatever, but that doesn't mean that the decision, so far at least, for other school districts to play is reckless. They're different circumstances. The case numbers are different in different places. There are different priorities. There's just all kinds of different things. I think that we'd be a lot better off if we spent time in that space of trying to deal with the people that are trying to handle this responsibly, whether they agree with you or not.
We had an interesting, it was actually an op-ed, I think, in our editorial page the other day by I can't remember who the woman was, I'm sorry, but she wrote kind of about the death of nuance and the idea of how, incompatible things can be weighed all at the same time, right? And it was very striking. And that 1-2 punch of that, and reading the way you phrased that the other day, Sam, is, I don't know, just really awakened some thinking in me about how we need to understand that you can't just decide it is that way or the highway and back and forth the same way all the time. That's become kind of the creed of our country. It's why we're kind of in the chaos we're in, and people can't, I'm just metaphorically saying, reach across the aisle in general to try to understand where everybody else is coming from. So I can't really add to how you phrased that. I thought that was important, what you wrote and what you just said.
Thank you. Like, one thing that I keep thinking too is that it feels like there used to be this acknowledgement, and maybe that's just like, rose-colored, just pining for the past or whatever. But it seems like there used to be an acknowledgement that if I feel differently about an issue than you, that may be just because I've had a different life experience than you. It doesn't mean that you're right and I'm wrong. It means that I've had this set of life experiences that brings me to this decision, that I think this is the best way either for me or, for whatever. And you've had this other life experience, and that gives you a different perspective. And there used to be, I feel like, more of an acknowledgement of, you know what, that's interesting. You disagree. Why? Let's talk about this and figure it out. And now it just seems like it's very much, oh, you disagree with me? Screw you. You're dead wrong, and you're a moron, or you're, crazy for whatever. And it just, we need to get past that. Like, we need, we have more in common with each other, I think, generally, than we've sort of made it appear. And that's a collective failure. That's not, I'm not pointing the blame at any particular demographic. I think that's a collective. We've all created this world. I think we've all had a part of it, and I think it's up to, hopefully the reasonable among us in the middle to bring that back a little bit if we can.
Just a quick addition. I love conversations that kind of begin with people asking themselves what their commonalities are before they begin to try to resolve the other, because I think if you started that way, it really is a problem-solving situation instead of I got to win situation.
I probably should bring this up like right live taping, right? But didn't President Bush say something like that in the wake of those the Dallas police shootings a few years ago? He said something like that about, if you start from where you agree instead of what separates you, it's a lot more productive conversation, and it just seems like that is gone in most conversations now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That will do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. Big thanks to Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian for stopping by and talking Chiefs and Arrowhead Stadium and high school sports. Hey, we have linked to their stories in the show notes, and you can find their stuff, of course, on kansascity.com. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands, and it is still a good one, $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage. That includes the Sports Extra that comes with the e-edition. There's more than 50 additional pages of national sports coverage today. I can remember when I was telling you there were more than 20 additional pages. Well, with baseball season, there's a whole separate section on Major League Baseball every day in the e-edition. Well, here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues like Vahe and Sam, plus extra news, sports, and business coverage with that e-edition. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we will be back on Wednesday with another edition.